so you're in grade 11. You start to think about, okay, maybe there's something in this art field. It's because detective is out, astronaut is out, and now scientist is out too.
Yeah.
So this art thing, maybe there's something here. Today we've got a very special guest, one of the very first instructors that we had on Pencil Kings. Sycra's been blowing up. I don't know how many views he has now. I'm sure it's in the millions of views. Got hundreds of videos up online.
Maybe a lesson that everybody should learn is that things come out of nothing. Things evolve out of nothing. The tiniest seed in the right situation turns into the most beautiful forest.
Sycra, welcome to the call. How are you doing today?
Hi, Mitch. Hi, Pencil Kings audience. I'm doing good. Yeah.
It's great to have you online. So just a little backstory here. So Sycra and I, we actually got to meet a couple of weeks ago, I think now.
Yeah.
I always think it's cool to meet the people that you admire and that you have communications with online in the offline world. And it's always been amazing because you have this perception of people online. And then when you meet them in person, it's like, oh, wow, man, this guy's like my best friend. It's like we've been friends for years, but I've never met him before. It's kind of this weird juxtaposition of emotions. So
yeah,
really
Mitch is really handsome.
All right, so let's dive into this. So can you just tell us a little about yourself, Sycra, and where you're at now with your career and goals and things that you're working on?
About myself, well, I'm a freelance artist and also a teacher, and I pretty much devote most of my time in between those two things, either doing freelance work or teaching through YouTube videos. I used to do private teaching, and that was before and during when I first started working with Pencil Kings, but then freelance took over more of that. And right now, as you mentioned, I've been working on developing a new style and actually working on some independent personal projects for something. I don't know when it would be released. Probably not for a few years, but there's something I'm working on.
Cool. I always like these secret projects, and then you're like, remember I told you about that project, a few years ago? It's out. Check it out. Check out this link. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So take us back to the beginning. Like, did you always know that you wanted to be an artist, or was there something else that when you were a kid you wanted to be before you had this inspiration to be an artist?
Yeah, I actually didn't want to be an artist when I was a kid. I didn't think of art as anything more than a hobby. It was just something that I did when I was bored. I wanted to be a scientist. I remember actually writing down like a bunch of different jobs I wanted to be, and one of them was like detective. One of them was astronaut. And like artist was not on the list.
You said that you would just do sketching when you were bored. Is it like you had a little sketchbook, or what kind of stuff were you doing back then? And what age was this that we're talking about?
Oh boy, as far back as I can remember, I think I did my first drawing when I was 2 or 3, and it was a drawing of my dad, and I remember being proud of it because I thought it looked better than the other kids' work that I had seen. Like it was probably really bad, but anyway, it was just in school books, the lined paper, and then or I'd always draw on tests or homework because I don't want to say this, I don't know how to say this without sounding kind of like I was smart. I would always finish my work early and have a lot of extra time, so I would draw.
For me, it's a very similar story. A lot of my test papers had drawings on the margins, and I would hand them in. I never got any comments on them, but. So when does it go from kind of like a hobby or something that you do when you're bored to something that you're actually going to pursue? Was there a turning point, or what changed for you?
I think it's when I first discovered comic books. I got really into comics, and then I was just thinking like, this is so cool. But I'd already had this established idea that I'm going to be a scientist though. So this is cool, but it's a hobby, or it's something that I won't pursue. And it wasn't until I started doing pretty badly in my science courses and math that I thought, because as I said, I started out smart, and I'm not saying it like a bragging thing. I'm actually saying it as a problem, because the problem with being, and this is the same with people who are talented in any field. I feel if you're very good right in the beginning, you don't work as hard. So for me, I never learned how to study. I never did homework because I always finished it really quick. That was okay for a while. And I was born in England, and the education system's a lot better than in Canada. So when I first came to Canada, from England, we were doing multiplication and division. In Canada, they were still on addition. So it was like, well, everything was a breeze. And I was just coasting until I think it was grade 11. And then I was taking chemistry and physics, and math started to become more difficult. And I didn't know what to do because the other kids, they were struggling in the beginning just like I was. But then as time went on, they were getting better. And it sounds strange, but I didn't know how they were doing it. And it's just they were studying. But like that concept, sitting down and studying, I never did that. So yeah, I thought, wow, I guess I'm not talented at science after all. It sounds really ridiculous, but this is the way I was thinking at the time. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll pursue art.
When you had that thought, were you thinking comic books specifically, or just art in general, or did you have an idea of what kind of a career you might want to do in art?
Yeah, I thought maybe comics. I really didn't know, though. This was before the internet. No, the internet was around, but it wasn't as accessible as it is now, where people, you can see artists and you can see them talking about the careers. I didn't know what a concept artist was, for instance. So yeah, I just thought I want to do art. I didn't know what that meant. If it meant comics, that was fine. I think if anyone had told me, do you want to do this job, and it happens to be related to art, I would have jumped on it.
Prince of Kings.
When did you, so you're in grade 11, you start to think about, okay, maybe there's something in this art field. It's because detective is out, astronaut is out, and now scientist is out too.
Yeah.
So this art thing, maybe there's something here. When did you apply like a professional's mindset? Maybe you weren't professional yet, but you just started to dedicate yourself and to study more. And where did that lead?
I think it was a gradual process where at first I was doing a drawing, maybe I would do it whenever I felt like it. So it might be like a few a week. And then I decided, well, I'm not going to be able to become an artist doing this much. So I'm going to do an hour a day. And then that turned into 2 hours a day, and then 3 hours a day. And each time I always had the impression of, oh, I'm going to be serious now and do more. So I always thought I was being more professional, but I guess it wasn't until, I don't know, the last 4 or 5 years that I could say I was doing real work and maybe having a real professional attitude to pursuing art, where I just make it my whole life.
And so you went from 3 hours a day to 8 hours a day, or what happened 4 years ago?
Well, a little bit before that, I started seeing a private teacher. He actually had a method to how to do things where I would do value studies of still lifes. And because before I was lost, I didn't know what to do. And that's why I didn't put in as much time. But as soon as I had direction, as soon as it was like, okay, just do this. At that time, I think I was doing around 10 or 12 hours a day, actually, of just drawing. As soon as I woke up, I started drawing, and the whole day just drawing. And then, so I improved pretty quick in a month or two.
Was that just a period where you said, like, I'm getting serious about this. I've got this teacher. I'm going to do this for 10 to 12 hours a day. I've saved up enough money that I can do this? Or what other circumstances allowed you to do this? Because I think it's unique that a lot of people don't have that luxury or that option to do 10 to 12 hours a day to really, dive into the deep end on this.
That's true. Well, I did have some savings, and I did have some jobs that weren't art related, that weren't very nice before, that I had saved up for. And at this time I was still living with my parents, so it wasn't ideal circumstances, I suppose, but it is something that you do need the luxury of time, I feel.
How did you go from there basically to where you're at now? Can you bridge the gap for us there?
Right. So I mentioned I was doing still lifes with this guy, and he was teaching me how to paint realistic fine art. And that was sort of, at that time, I was thinking, okay, I'll be a portrait artist. And I was thinking about applying to galleries, and I did get some work in some galleries early on. And then I saw the work of Jason Seiler, who's a caricaturist and a really great painter, but he combined the two. So when he would do a portrait, it felt more, it had more likeness than me doing my realistic rendition of the person. He was able to exaggerate features and push things. So I was thinking, like, this is no longer good enough. What I'm doing is copying what's in front of me. I want to be able to exaggerate. And so I took a schoolism course with Jason Seiler and learned how to caricature. From there, my brother had attended Vancouver Film School and took classical animation. And I was always afraid of animation because I felt like I don't have the patience to do animation. But I was also envious of animators because they had really nice lines, the way they had movement and life. And I looked at my caricatures because now I was doing caricatures, and I was like, yeah, they're okay, but they're stiff. They don't have that movement. So then I got, student loans, and I took a year of animation school. Coming out of animation school, I didn't feel it had equipped me as well as perhaps they had promised, and it was expensive. Throughout this time, I was doing YouTube videos. So whenever I'd learn something new, I would make a YouTube video. Like, this is what I know now. And I think around that time is when Pencil Kings had contacted me. And I started teaching more and realizing that, okay, people seem to get something out of it. And perhaps it was just because I had taken a lot of different paths. So I had a little bit of knowledge on a lot of different subjects.
How many YouTube videos are you up to now?
I think 316.
Stone Cold
Steve Austin.
Yeah, there we go. Like, I know that we have people coming to, like, all the time, raving, wanting more from you. Tell us just a little bit about that experience of being a teacher, because it seems like you kind of stumbled into it.
Yeah, well, it was always this thing of I struggled so hard. And I can't say I've made every mistake. I probably will end up making every mistake, but I made so many mistakes, especially early on when I was talking about that thing of talent, right? That was a big one for me, where I didn't know that art was hard work. And this was reinforced by people around me, where no one would say, oh, you're good at art because you must have worked really hard. They always said you're good at art because you're talented. But then when I would hear, if there was a person who, for instance, they played a musical instrument, everyone accepted, like, oh, you must practice really hard. It felt like, well, okay, so for music, you have to work hard and get good, but for art, you just have to be talented. So anyway, I just would learn things, and it was so tough that I thought, I wish I knew an easier way earlier, and I eventually would find easy ways to do things or to understand concepts, and it was just a case of like, well, I can't benefit because I'm at the stage I am now, but maybe if there's one person who's in the same position as I was in, starting out, they could be helped. So that's where it really started. I was very hesitant to even post my first video because I was thinking, I'm not good enough to teach. Like, who am I? There's so many other artists that were better than me. And I thought, if I post, maybe other artists would be like, well, who are you? You haven't worked for a big studio. Why are you trying to teach? Who do you think you are? And then I realized, well, I'm not teaching them. I'm just teaching someone who's just, a step below me, perhaps, who's confused and struggling. And it's like, here, let me help you out a little bit,
A lot of people have that same fear of, like, I can't post this online because it's not good enough. Look at all this amazing artwork on DeviantArt or conceptart.org or some other site. But it's like, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back about a year ago now, I had talked to you about doing some more lessons, and you said that you were too busy, that you were going to work on your own style. But how did you come about this idea that you needed to work on your style, and what did that mean? Because at the time, I didn't really understand it.
Yeah, so I was working on a lot of freelance illustration and specifically card art for trading card games. And I would look at my portfolio, and it was just like, none of this felt like me. I wasn't happy with what I saw. And even when I would get praise from people, they would say like, oh, I like this piece or that piece. I just felt, I don't know, this emptiness that it's like, but I'm not doing what I want to be doing. So then I start thinking, well, what is it that you want to be doing, right? Like, if you're going to be saying this isn't me, then who are you? And start to think back, like, okay, well, what do I enjoy? What kind of art do I like to look at, and not what kind of art am I impressed by? Because those are two different things. Because there's a bunch of artists, I'm impressed by them. I love their work, but I don't enjoy looking at their work. And I think the way I could tell the difference is to go back to when I was a kid. Because when you're a kid, you don't care if artwork is necessarily impressive, or at least I didn't. I just wanted art that was cool. And what was cool to me were artists like J. Scott Campbell, Joe Mad, Greg Capullo, Todd McFarlane, and then on the other side, there's manga artists. So that was really what I liked to see, and that's what I wasn't seeing. I was seeing in my galleries, I was seeing heavily rendered stuff, which honestly, I don't care that much about that stuff. I don't care that much about realism. So then I started pursuing the stuff I used to do, and I wasn't sure where to start. So I started studying different artists that I felt like I kind of wish I could draw maybe poses like this person, or eyes a little bit like them. And I started doing studies, trying to figure out, how did they do this? I would look at it and draw it, and then I would think, but how would I do it differently? Because I think we all have that, where you look at a piece and it's like, oh, I really love that. But if I could do that, if I had that skill, I would make that sword a bit longer, something like that. You know, I would make that hair a bit different. When you actually build up your skill that you can do that, then it's just a matter of, okay, well, then do it. What I was doing is always going back to things like, I would make that sharper. I started incorporating that into my work, and it got more pointy and more sharp until I have this very sharp style with pointy noses, pointy hair, pointy chins, everything's very pointy, but it feels like me. And I started posting this on DeviantArt. On DeviantArt, people seem to be pretty supportive, and they seem to like the direction I'm heading. But I did see some stuff on 4chan. Wouldn't recommend going to 4chan. It's brutal, but there's a lot of comments that were like, "Wow, I didn't know this community existed." But they're very harsh, and they're like, "Why is he doing this stuff? His new stuff is ugly. He used to be doing good stuff." I'm like, oh, but. Yeah, it was different. I was finally feeling good. When people would compliment me, I felt like, you know what? Thank you. Honestly, I appreciate it. Whereas before, they would say, good job, and my initial reaction was always like, oh, no, it's not that good. I could do better. And I didn't know where that was coming from. But now I realize you're not satisfied because you're not you.
Well, that's really, really interesting. I've never thought of it that way, and I've never heard anyone explain it. I've just thought of it in terms of that, there's people, and you would say, like, that artist has a certain style, and then there's other people you'd say that artist is mimicking this other artist's style, or this person is copying this style. But never that when you produce work that is your personal style, something that you've created and has come forth from you, that you feel pretty good about it because it's it's very true to what you want to be doing. Yeah,
and I also think when you copy another artist. And even with these mimicking style things, I used to really look down on it, and I used to think like, well, you're nothing more than just a mime. You're just mimicking this guy. But now what I realize is that when you mimic another artist, it's because they have something that is in you, and what you're really doing is you're trying to find yourself, and you're seeing yourself in that other artist. But then this thing is, after a while, what you have to do is add more of yourself and get rid of the parts that aren't you. And that's another way to develop a style. And that's why I think people that do copy another artist, it's not necessarily bad. It's in a way, it's a way of finding yourself. I think the important thing is to copy multiple artists and find out, well, I like the colors of this one and that one, and discover but then how would I change it? What would I do differently? And that's a way to find yourself.
Awesome. So, if somebody wanted to try this exploration, how long did this take you? From the point of view saying like, no, I'm going to work on my own style. I'm focusing on this too. I produced my first piece. It's maybe not perfect, but this is my style. Like this is, if you're going to go back and look at the Sycra chronological order of artwork, this piece is the turning point. How long was that process?
I suppose 2 years, where I started to say to people like, I'm starting to work on my style, because what I would always hear in the beginning is people would say, you don't have to work on your style, you just naturally do it. It just happens. And I think that's true to a point. And the point is this, that of course we all have a natural style that we cannot get rid of, no matter what. If I draw, I'm always going to do things a certain way. But then there's something where, for instance, you look at The Simpsons, and you wouldn't say Matt Groening sees people, well, white people, because it seems to only be white people, but they're yellow, right? I'm sure he doesn't look at the world and just see that. It's not like that's his style, but it's something that's created. That's a manufactured style. That's to say, yeah, but this grabs attention. I want people to be focused on this, and that's why I'll create it. So that's a bit different than just like, well, I naturally just draw and this is how it comes out. So I divided it into inherent style and contrived style or manufactured style. And what I was focused on is that more manufactured style, where I would experiment with different ways of drawing eyes. For a while, I was doing very round forms, and it didn't feel like me. So, it was about a good 2 years of hard work, and everything else I'd learned was all used as well. So there's a bit of caricature in there. There's a bit of comic book stuff from way back. So, yeah.
Would you say that the first step would be to just spend some time browsing, see what speaks to you, like what resonates? What do you feel when you're looking at something? Are you impressed by it because of the technical ability, or are you like actually excited by it? And then to keep maybe a folder of these things that you're excited, or maybe it's just elements of certain artists, like you're saying the colors that they use. So maybe you have a colors folder where the artists that use colors that excite you, you just start collecting this stuff, and eventually you have sort of this canvas, and then or this research database that you can then go into and start picking out and dive into it a little bit more. Would you say that's a way to start this, or how would you approach it, or recommend somebody approach it?
Yeah, I think that's a great way. Another way is just look back at what did you like when you were a kid? Because I think a lot of artists get this way, where we end up getting obsessed about skill, like, wow, that guy's so good at rendering or whatever, and we forget the joy of just being a kid and just liking art for art. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is, whenever you look at art and you like it, try and think a little bit more about why you like it. Like, what exactly is it that you like? When you look at a pose, it's like, you know what? I really like the way this guy has energy. And then look at some of his other pieces and see if it's a pattern. Like, yeah, you know what? This guy's really good at energy. How is he getting that energy? That's something I really want in my work. Or understand that sometimes you're impressed by something. Like for me, I don't like rendering. I hate to render. I hate making things look really finished and polished and realistic, but I can admire it. So when I look at it in the work of others, I'm like, wow, that's great. I sort of wish I could do that, but I'm not gonna. That's not me. And I think a lot of that just comes from practice, where are you having fun? I remember when I first got into caricatures, I never wanted to be a caricaturist. I didn't think they were particularly cool. My idea of caricaturist was a street artist who just drew people, and I thought it's like, well, that's not that interesting. But when I started doing caricature, I couldn't stop smiling. And I used to be almost angry with myself, like, stop it. Why are you having so much fun doing this? And it was so much fun. So, yeah.
All right. I think that about wraps us up. So if you want to find your own style, there's some good tips there. And I think just the way that you look at art, for me, listening to how you've looked at your art is completely different than how I've looked at art myself. And I'm really grateful for the insights, because I think that it's, for me personally, I'm at a place now where I'm getting back into doing my own art and experimenting with things and trying things that excite me. And I can feel what you're talking about, that excitement where you're smiling. These days, I've just been doing like little silhouette sketches, and I'm having so much fun with it. Whereas before, I used to think that I had to do something very perfected, and it's fun to go back to this place where art is fun again. So to wrap things up, Sycra, can you tell everybody where they can find you online if they want to see more of your videos or more of your artwork? Where are you at?
For sure. So, well, you're probably watching this on Pencil Kings, so you'll find me on Pencil Kings. You'll also find me on YouTube at www.youtube.com/Sycra, and my Twitter is like, if you just search for Sycra, Sycra, you'll probably find all the things. I'm on DeviantArt under Sycra as well. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for being on the call today. I really, I learned a lot. I'm sure that the people, when they listen to it, you've got a lot of fans. So hopefully some of them will get a little bit more insight into the mind of Sycra. And thanks again. And hopefully we can have you on again soon.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right. Cheers, Sycra.
Bye.
Scope demands patience, skill, years of practice.
Ah, you talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.
That's it for this episode. We'd really love your support, so if you could hop on over to iTunes, hit that 5-star review, and then leave us some kind words, we'd really appreciate it. If you're looking for more, you can find us at pencilkings.com or on Facebook at facebook.com/pencilkings. See you soon.
Another amazing Podcast Magic production.